Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Abby here with us today. I met Abby on Instagram and you were posting these amazing badass breastfeeder posts with pictures of women breastfeeding and really empowering um, dialogue around the importance of breastfeeding. And as listeners will know about me, I couldn't help but reach out to you, invite you to be on the podcast. It was so refreshing to see that. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself, introduce yourself, share about what got you into breastfeeding and what comes up for you when I ask you to share about your womb-centered healing journey.
Well, yeah, I'd love to share. So my name is Abby Theuring, and I live in Chicago. And I have a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old son. And before I had children, I'm sorry, that just came out of nowhere. Suddenly my voice is rattling. Before I had children, I was a social worker. And I worked with teenagers who were a part of the child welfare system. So I was all kinds of things. I was a therapist and a counselor and a case manager and all of these things. And I'll just tell my big long story. So I had my first son, Jack, and I worked all the way through my pregnancy. I planned to return to work and, do the daycare and all of that. And I knew I wanted to breastfeed. I don't know why. If, it wasn't like I had never seen breastfeeding. I had never, I didn't know anything about it. I had literally never seen a person engaging in the act of breastfeeding. I just wanted to. It sounded like something I wanted to do. And so I had my son, and having worked with kids, I think I felt like, oh, I've got this good foundation. I'm ahead of the game because I had worked with kids, so this is going to be great. This is going to work out really well, smooth transition. And the day that I had my child, they handed me this tiny baby, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I was just, I had, anybody who has, had children, of course, you're just like, what in the world? And I had a hospital birth for with my first son, and it was a very traumatic birth. And I'm leaving the hospital with this baby, and I'm like, you're just going to let me leave with the baby? I felt totally unqualified. I felt like I was stealing something like that I wasn't supposed to have, that I wasn't, smart enough or good enough or whatever to handle. And I started off with a whole host of terrible information about breastfeeding. We were supplementing with formula because they told me that I wasn't making enough milk. So we were sent home, and it was very rocky. I was very anxious, always kind of struggled with anxiety. And now I have this baby, and I was anxious all the time, and breastfeeding wasn't working. And it was just, for some reason, something that I really wanted to do. And I just kept trying. And I was Googling, everything. And through Google, I found out about lactation consultants. I'd never heard of that before. And I called one, and I said, this is my situation. I'm really struggling. Everything's going wrong. And she was just like, a lot of people go through this, and it's okay. You can just, and she kind of helped me work off the formula very simply. And then we were exclusively breastfeeding by, I don't know, a few months. And it was just like so liberating. It felt so, it was empowering, to be able to just be nourishing this new baby and giving this baby life with just my body. I feel like, which of course happened, I grew this baby with my body, but I never really questioned my ability to do that. It just happened. But then as soon as the baby was here and I was kind of more, I had to be more thoughtful about how I was caring for him, I was completely lost, and I felt so insecure about it. So when it was working and it started going well and it was just me and my baby and my body, it was like, I felt like the most powerful person. And I actually asked a friend of mine, we were in the park and I was breastfeeding, and I said, hey, take a picture of me. And she took a picture of me and I posted it in this mom Facebook support group. And people freaked out. People were like, that's disgusting. Why are you posting that here? You should have a cover on. This was, this was exactly 9 years ago. Well, 8.5 years ago. And it was just, I had no idea that there was this, breastfeeding politics. So I was stunned. They kicked me out of the group, and it was just, it was crazy. And I thought, I'm going to start a Facebook page and I'm going to just share breastfeeding photos, and I'm going to fill everyone's news feeds with breastfeeding photos. And I'm just going to, just have a breastfeeding, big breastfeeding nurse in on Facebook and whatever. So I started this Facebook page and I started sharing photos of myself. And I shared that story about what happened with getting started with breastfeeding and how hard it was. And people were just like, wait a minute. It was stunning to find out how many people had the exact same story. And people were sending me photos all the time. And, I don't know, another child, and 8 years later, it's still going on.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like your journey of devotion to breastfeeding and this empowerment that you experienced of, oh wow, I could get help, an expert person help me figure this out, and now I'm feeding my baby from my own body, which, when we look at how we're designed naturally to grow a baby in the womb and give birth to it, we're designed to breastfeed that baby to grow until until it's ready to eat other food on its own. I mean, that's how we're designed. That's how animals do it in the wild. Why are human beings any different? Why would there be any question about us doing that? And that brings those questions up. But so the fact that there was so much misinformation at the hospital when you gave birth is a big topic of discussion. And the fact that people rejected you and kicked you out of a group of moms for showing your breastfeeding. These are the two topics that are standing out for me. So what do you feel about that? What do you think about that new moms are getting such misinformation about breastfeeding?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, I think these are the two things that drive this blog, and they drive this, this whole movement, and drive the whole conversation in this country, which is misinformation from the start, which then we have to, if we're going to talk about that, we need to talk about formula companies and the, aggressive marketing that goes on with new parents, and how, a lot of the misinformation that goes on is rooted back to formula companies, of people thinking that their milk is not good enough, or that they don't have enough milk, or that, at some point their child is not getting enough from their milk and they should be having some other kind of milk or formula. And then the other side is, breastfeeding in public, and what the female body is seen as in our society as, mainly sexualized. And, when it comes to breastfeeding, or you see a breast being used for its natural purposes, it's taboo.
And have you looked into the origins of, I mean, you talked about the formula companies. I think these two topics go hand in hand. The taboo about breastfeeding made it easy for formula companies to say, oh, well, you don't really want to do that nasty thing anyway. Here's your formula. And by the way, it's better for your baby anyway, because you can't really do it anyway. But I think that goes back even before that women would even question our ability to do that, something so naturally intrinsic to who we are as women, and listen to that voice that's saying, oh, you can't really do it. Right? That goes back a long way. And there seems to be intrinsic to the system that is exploitive and abusive to women and to the feminine. And so I really feel that this reclaiming of our natural power to birth and feed our babies, this power of generating new life, it's this huge power. It's like, how could anyone question that? You know? But it's on this, it's like this thing in our society where that's being suppressed, that's being oppressed, that power is being oppressed and taken from us for the purposes of the powers that be that, want to own all of that and commodify all of that and make money off of all of that. And so
I think,
go ahead, tell me what you think.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think it's also intertwined, right? I mean, it's just all, I mean, the desire to control women, the desire to own women is ancient, right? I mean, this is not new. But, and so there's the origins of that are so old and, tied in with, I don't know, ancient civilizations and religion and all of these, things that, I don't know, people have PhDs in, not me, but, but then you have, like you were saying, you have our, now we live in this capitalist, nation where really making money is, the main goal, I think we live in a time too now during this pandemic, we really see this highlighted, right? It's all about making money. And that will go on, we really see the priorities, I think, are exposed. I mean, not that we didn't see it before, but it's really being kind of glaringly exposed now, where it's just about really making money and controlling women and keeping that misinformation alive. And that it all fuels that goal, right? It all kind of works together. It all feeds off of itself.
Mm-hmm. So just this act of saying, you know what, I'm going to start, posting pictures of myself and other women breastfeeding publicly, and just confronting that with this reality, with this natural power that we have to generate new life, to nourish new life. It's so revolutionary to just say, hey, okay, you're gonna, do whatever you're doing that's really kind of suppressing life. And guess what? This is the medicine right here. This is the medicine for that self-destructive jag that humanity seems to be in right now. Like thinking that maybe if we do all these self-destructive things, maybe we'll be happier. Maybe no. It's like this myth that maybe we're going to be happier by making more money when really we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. And so returning to the simple ability that we have intrinsic to generate new life is so powerful, so revolutionary. And so I imagine that when you had your second child, right? You said you had a daughter too.
Two sons, but yeah.
Oh, two sons. Okay. And when you had your second son, that you had more information now, and you had a different approach. What was that? Was your birth any different? And what was your breastfeeding journey like then?
Yeah, that was called what I call the healing birth. It was, I was at this point, people say to me, I had a home birth. People will say, weren't you afraid of having a home birth? And I say, I was terrified to return to a hospital. I'm not scared at all of home births because after that first traumatic hospital birth, where, you know, I was really just treated like an item on a conveyor belt, an inconvenience, you know, really. And so through the badass breastfeeder and through the community that I had built, I don't know if I would have been exposed to some things like home birth or tandem nursing without that. And it was really through that community where I learned, there's other ways to give birth. It doesn't have to be, there's empowering ways to do that. And so I got pregnant with my second son, and I said I really want to have a home birth, and I was still nursing my first son, so I also wanted to tandem nurse, which I was very excited about. And so it was perfect. It was wonderful, and it was very empowering, and it was, it was in my living room,
right?
And it was fantastic, and I got to spend, I found the gentle birth care midwives here in Chicago, and I had a wonderful doula who I met with, many times before the birth, who she really helped me work through those fears that I had developed around birth from my first experience, so that I didn't have to carry that, into my second. And so that was fantastic. And, it was still birth, it was hard, and it was all of those things, but it was so just raw and cool and empowering and all of those things. And I was surrounded by, the people that I had chosen, people I developed relationships with, people I knew, had my best interest, who were there to support and celebrate with me. And it went, it wasn't even like, at some point the midwife, while I was pushing, it was transition, or, it was really like hard labor. She was taking the my son's heart rate. She was checking his heart rate, and it was really slowing down to like an alarm. Even I was alarmed at how slow it was. And she was like, I'm pretty sure that it's just from the contractions, so we're going to just keep pushing. And, I had oxygen on, and, it wasn't smooth. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't like, I wasn't in a meadow, like it was birth. It was like, there were things, and they were trained, and they were dealing with it. And afterwards I said, I was, I knew what was going on, but afterwards, I was talking to her, and this is the other thing that didn't happen at the hospital. She was like talking to me about what was going on, and I was asking her, I said, why? I said, now, why did you give me oxygen again? So she was explaining. She said, well, his heart rate was slowing down, and so, I wanted to give you oxygen, passes the oxygen to the placenta so that he would have a little extra oxygen. And she said, if you were going to take much longer to deliver your son, I would have suggested that maybe we transfer to a hospital. But she said to me, I knew you were going to push that baby out. She just said, I knew you were going to do that. And I don't believe that I was surrounded by anybody in the hospital that believed that I could do something, that believed really that I could, with my body, deliver a baby, which is what I was born to do. I have all of the parts and all of the, things that we have in order to have babies. They're all right here. But I don't believe that anybody in that hospital actually believed that I could do it. And I think that that's common. And I think that is such a problem. It's this perspective that we have of that, birth is not natural, and birth is dangerous, and birth is, something that we just can't do without medical intervention. And I know that medical intervention does save moms and babies. It does. But in the majority of the time, it's not. It's often causing more problems.
Well, as a doula, we have word for that, where there's this cascade effect of intervention.
Yes, right.
So there's all these moments in the medicalized birth situation early on, where um, you know, these earlier interventions that are kind of encouraged to, like, because it's inconvenient, and because birth doesn't happen on anybody's schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and because doctors and nurses want to be done with you, right? Because once they're on with you, they have to kind of stay with you. They don't want to be called back in later, so
Yeah.
they want to get it to happen quickly, so that it's convenient, right? So there's that, I'm an inconvenience, right?
Yeah.
And so there's just these smaller interventions that cascade into bigger and bigger interventions, because as soon as you try to induce and disrupt the body's natural preparations by pushing it along, then a lot of those induction methods make it too strong, make the contractions too strong. Like Pitocin, for example, can make the contractions too strong, and the body's not ready yet, so the cervix might not be able to even open, but it's making these really strong contractions, which then puts the baby under distress, and eventually it causes more pain for the mother, who then is asking for more interventions with the epidural or this or that, and the epidural can actually stop the process from happening, because so then you've got these super strong contractions, and so it can be this cascade of interventions that ends up needing to be a cesarean birth. Whereas if that mother was and that baby were allowed to go at their own natural pacing and not treated as an inconvenience and hurried along, and then none of that would have happened, and the natural birth process would have happened in its own time. Now, that's not always the case, because sometimes there really is a need, like you said, for those interventions, and yet our commercialized medical system then comes into play, because doctors get paid more the more procedures they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an intrinsic motivation and bias towards doing more procedures and selling more drugs. And so that the commercialized medical system is partly part of this, problem too. The capitalist medical system. The priority is not about, is divorced from what's
Right.
really the best for anyone's health and well-being, and is about what makes the hospital and what makes the practitioners the most money. Now, there are many practitioners who have their heart really in a good place and are really trying to do their best to be of service for people's health and well-being within this system that's pushing them towards making more money for the hospital. It's the system
Right.
needing to make money for the hospital that's pushing them, even though their intention isn't there. And so, I don't want to say that all doctors and nurses are, no, that's not the case at all. My husband works at a hospital, and he's always telling me stories about these wonderful nurses and wonderful doctors that are really there for the patients and like that. But that the system of capitalism in healthcare is very problematic, because it's pushing people to do more procedures to make more money somehow, and
Right.
especially in maternal care. And so it sounds like you kind of received an on-the-job education about all of this. And I'm curious about what the approach to all of this was in your family growing up. Were you breastfed by your mother? I guess you hadn't seen any other siblings being breastfed, or cousins, or, friends of the family breastfeeding their babies. You had never seen anyone be breastfed. Were you breastfed growing up?
I was breastfed. I think my mom told me I was breastfed for 3 months, and then her doctor said that it was time to wean and to use formula. And so my mom was like 20, and she was like, okay. So she did that. Not that you can't know things when you're 20, but she she didn't know any different, and she
So
just
here
did.
again, we have a doctor promoting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, a weaning baby means that they're ready for food, like regular human food. A baby that needs formula can just as well drink breast milk. You know, what the
Right.
only motivation for telling mothers that it's time to wean or you can't really breastfeed in the first place, here, take this formula, is to sell more formula.
Right.
There's really no health benefit, but there's this whole propaganda, and this is the same story I have of, you know, my mom being a young mother and her mother having been told by the doctors and having all this shame. Like when my grandmother was pregnant, they would wear trench coats to cover up their belly, even in the
Oh.
summer, because it was shameful even to be seen as being pregnant, even
Oh.
though that was supposed to be the whole purpose of a woman's life,
Right.
to have a baby. And everybody's like, when are you going to be pregnant? When are you going to have a baby? Once you get married, you got to have a baby. You know, all this pressure to, and then as soon as you're pregnant, ready to have a baby, oh, don't let anyone see, even though you're married and we've all been rooting for you to get pregnant and have this baby. Don't let anyone see. You know,
You can't win.
you can't win. And so, um, so that started back from there where they were telling people straight out, women, mothers, you know, just giving birth, only breastfeed every 4 hours, no more frequently than that. And that's completely against how naturally works. So yeah, you don't have enough milk at first because you're developing your milk, and the baby's capacity to drink milk and your capacity to produce milk grows gradually as you breastfeed on demand whenever the baby cries, because it can only swallow, it only has a tiny little stomach at first, and it can only take in so much. So it's good that the breast doesn't make, our breasts don't make that much milk at first, right? And so understanding how it naturally works, there's no understanding in these doctors' brains and these breastfeeding, you know, these formula companies' brains
Yeah.
about how it actually works to gradually build up and grow, right? Which is what your lactation consultant probably told you. This is how you gradually grow your capacity, right? Can you share with us more about that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just to go off of what you were saying too, though, I mean, I don't believe that there is total ignorance all the way up the chain. I do think that there is somewhere along the lines, people do know, you know, they know what they're doing. You know, the marketing of formula, just, you know, the withholding of information about the natural process is intentional. You know, it is for the purpose of making money, you know, as we were saying. You know, medical lactation and natural childbirth are not a part of medical curriculum. They're not even given this information, you know, through their training. That's not even a part of it. And a medical curriculum is created by formula companies. These are
For
people who are providing the education, and this is all intentional. You know, it is all intentional to withhold the information about, you know, they're not going to just start training everyone on natural childbirth and breastfeeding. The whole system would collapse. There would be no more money, you know, to uphold these corporations. So this is all very, I believe that this is all very, you know, this is all very intentional. I don't think the doctors themselves are not like withholding the information, you know, like they're the ones who were not given the information, you know, and doctors are so much like, you know, also we could talk about the breakdown of, you know, societies and how we are not connected with our, you know, with elders and, you know, family and extended, you know, like more like tribal settings where people have information that they get from their family or extended family. We don't have that anymore. We rely on doctors for everything. And they don't have the answer for everything. But they give an answer. If you ask them, they'll just give you an answer. You know, and a lot of times it's just based on something that they heard or something, you know, that they just did in their family or some opinion that they have. It is not evidence-based information that they're handing out to parents. I mean, I spend most of my day answering messages from people that are like, my pediatrician just told me that I have to, that my baby's 6 months and needs to have cow's milk. It's endless. It's endless, and it's just constant. So it's very frustrating, and it's yeah, that's just more of what we were talking about.
Yeah. And so here we are with this awakening, which can be very frustrating and very sort of shaking of the foundation of like, wow, you mean I can't just trust that my doctor's going to give me accurate information?
Right. You can't.
And so for people who've been raised and lived their whole life trusting in that, suddenly that's like, well, then who do I go to for accurate information?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm loving hearing that the platform and community that you've created online, that's a big part of it, is disseminating more accurate information.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that it's about supporting people who are sort of having this difficult, frustrating, scary awakening. Well, if I can't trust them to tell me all the accurate information about that, what else can't I trust to get accurate information
Oh, yeah.
about from people? And I mean, I talk about this all the time with womb-centered healing and menstruation. I mean, there's really no training about menstruation.
Oh, yeah.
And menstruation is like a vital sign. It's just as important as your heart rate or your body temperature as far as determining your overall health. And it has way more information to give you about your overall health. And it's not just about your fertility. And even that, doctors don't even understand how it's related to your fertility. And, it's not just about symptom avoidance or anything like that. It's about bringing the whole body back into balance. And how menstrual symptoms, painful, difficult menstrual symptoms, are a sign that the whole body is not in balance and that the other organs are suffering too. But the womb is the one that has a voice to say something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been taught to sweep it under the rug, not listen to that voice, invalidate that voice, hide it, wrap it up in wads of toilet paper before you put your pads in the trash so nobody sees the blood, right? And so and make sure you clean those stains in any clothes you get it on or any sheets you get it on so nobody sees the stain. It's just this like suppression. And so when we wake up to that, like, wow, where is the information? And so you talked about getting in touch with lactation consultants and other people who are informed about lactation and breastfeeding. And now you, it sounds like, have become an advocate and an educational. Did you study to become a lactation consultant yourself, perhaps?
No, I'm a social worker. I'm a social worker. This is, yeah. I mean, it was very much in the beginning, it was very much a social work endeavor. And I talked a lot about attachment parenting. I talked in the beginning, I talked much more about parenting than I think I talked about breastfeeding. And it sort of found it's called the Badass Breastfeeder. So it really needs to be just about breastfeeding. But it's always been about, connecting with people and meeting people where they are and kind of, it's a social work thing, but I just have gathered so much breastfeeding information along the way. And, so I'm able to help a lot of people. And when I can't help, I mean, I certainly know when somebody comes to me with a problem that is beyond my ability. I work with a lactation consultant, so then I can refer people to her. So
right, beautiful. And so I imagine you talk a lot about the long-term health and psychological well-being, spiritual well-being benefits of breastfeeding. You mentioned attachment parenting, and breastfeeding is probably, I'm sure you could say a few words about how important a naturally, probably even extended breastfeeding can be for that approach to parenting. Could you say a few things about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that the science is pretty clear here. So, we make, we make with our bodies, we make this baby. And once we give birth to this baby, your body makes this perfect substance that is needed um, for the growth of their brains and their cells and their vital organs and all of these things. Um, and beyond that, I like to say breastfeeding is so much more than food. It's also this first sense of, safety and security. And this is where this bonding and attachment, begins with an infant. And that kind of thing is, that's sort of the basis of, you know, your relationships as an adult. This is something that lasts your whole lifetime and has an effect on your entire lifetime. Now, that is not to say that people that don't breastfeed don't bond or attach with their children. That is not the case. People can certainly practice attachment parenting and bottle feed. A lot of people do, especially when we live in a country that is asking you to go back to work when you are like barely healed from your birth. And so, people can obviously do that. But I think we could talk about, with as far as just like physical health, we've seen, and I think it's more accurate to say like, instead of saying benefits of breastfeeding, there really aren't benefits to breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is the biological norm. There are risks to not breastfeeding. And, when we don't breastfeed, we see, higher risk for things like childhood illnesses and asthma and, I don't know. I would need to have like some papers in front of me to really say it all accurately right now. But, various illnesses and, these are things that we have seen studied and reproduced in studies and things that we're pretty sure are, accurate. And we have plenty of, we have generations of bottle fed, formula fed people, so who people say I was formula fed and I'm fine. Okay. That's the kind of anecdotal stuff that we say in response to, science is, that's not the evidence,
Right. And what's considered fine in this culture
Yeah.
is different than what's actually healthy for a person. So
Right.
That person who says they're fine, they might have irritable bowel syndrome, but not really notice it, a mild version of it. They don't really digest certain foods. They might have asthma and don't relate it to being bottle fed. They might have allergies and don't relate it to being formula fed. They might have food sensitivities that they, don't relate it to being formula fed. They could have a whole host of things and say, "Oh, well, I'm fine," but really, there's all these things that affect their health, right and left.
Well, right. I think that we have normalized a lot of things in our culture. Just normalized a lot of, even just internally, like symptoms that, I had a friend, so I'm vegan, and I'm not saying that anybody else needs to be vegan. I'm just to set up the story. I was talking to my friend who was saying, I was talking about how much better I felt that I was eating this way. And he said to me, he goes, I don't, meat doesn't really make me, he's talking specifically about meat. He said, meat doesn't make me feel that way. And I said, well, how do you know? Like, how you've never been without, like, is it possible that that this has just been totally normalized in your body and you don't know, that you even are feeling any kind of effects from eating meat? And he was like, oh, yeah, I don't know, yeah, maybe. So I think that we all do that, I mean, I didn't, cheese particularly, I love and can't eat. I can't, I don't eat it anymore. And I noticed all of these things when I stopped eating it in my body, they just changed, anyway. So yeah, normalizing. I think we normalize so many things and we don't know it because it's normalized.
Right. Like, I learned that my chronic sinus infections were optional. like back in my 20s,
Right.
that I could just stop eating dairy and I would no
I love
longer have
that
chronic
optional.
sinus infections.
That's I love that optional. That's great. Yeah. True. Yes.
Whereas other people think, oh, it's just how I am,
Right.
and not
Yeah.
and not have the information that maybe if they change their diet, or not even, maybe they have that information but don't think it could possibly be true, or don't even
Yeah.
want to try because why? How could you live without cheese?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I know. I used to think that I couldn't live without it. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing all of these reflections, sharing about this wonderful educational work that you're doing to spread the word about the importance of returning to our natural ability to nourish ourselves, nourish our babies. And thank you so much for taking a stand about that and for being willing to be visible about that, and sharing all the beautiful pictures so people can find you on Facebook. But I think I found you on Instagram, isn't that right?
yeah, it's the Badass Breastfeeder on Facebook. It's the Badass Breastfeeder on Instagram. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's the Badass Breastfeeding podcast
Oh,
on
great. So
on
you
the internet.
uh-huh. So you host that podcast and interview breastfeeders and
Well, mostly no. I do. My co-host is Diane Cassidy, who is a lactation consultant,
uh-huh.
and we basically take the mounds of misinformation that is out there, and we break it down every week and try to get the good information out.
Awesome. Well, follow that podcast, folks, if you want to listen to more of this discussion. And again, listeners probably know by now that you can learn more about the Womb Centered Healing Temple and my Womb Centered Healing work by going to wombcenteredhealing.com and finding everything that's available there. Um, so thank you all for joining us. I encourage you to get signed up for the listeners to get signed up for the newsletter, because there's a lot of upcoming events, including an upcoming publication of my Herbal Womb Wellness Playbook, where you learn about herbal womb wellness and can make a plan for yourself for herbal womb wellness by filling out assessment forms and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't want to just do a straight book. I want it to be interactive, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
really cool.
yeah. So if you want to learn more about that book, listeners, please go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll be sending out information about pre-ordering that book very, very soon. So look forward to connecting with all of you, and thank you so much again, Abby. That's all for now. Until next time.